Good morning, class. I thought I'd give a brief lecture over week one, the material in the week one documents and folder inside Blackboard. I thought we would probably start off with the actual talk a little bit about the assignment that is due this Sunday by 11:59 that deals with the Virginia Woolf piece, the question, and talk a little bit more about that particular narrative essay that I put up there because we're going to look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is the first essay, the major essay that you're going to have to draft up for a peer review by 11:59 next Wednesday. There should be some narrative topics up there that we will talk about. Um, this particular piece by Virginia Woolf is a really good piece to sort of study to start off with because it has a good bit of the elements already involved that you would need for a really good narrative piece. This is also a chance for you to read a writer who has been published, who's made money in the field of writing. So you can't go wrong with a classic piece by Virginia Woolf. So to start off, I'm going to give you a brief video that sort of talks a little bit more about her life in case you want to know a little bit more about that. You might have, from high school, you might have read this piece at in high school, or maybe another short essay by her, or one of her novels. She was mostly a novelist. Um, but I think that would be really the good place to start and then sort of work backwards a little bit and look at some of the material that's in this first modular. We're going to hit the high notes. I'm not going to go over and read every single detail of every single thing in there because, again, I know you know how to read. And part of it, being on the internet, an online version of the class is for you to sort of take your time and go through it. And then if you have any particular concerns or issues or questions to sort of get back and reach with me either through Teams. Hopefully everybody, I know some of y'all have already clicked on the link that I sent out for that virtual sort of classroom with Teams for office hours and for possible virtual tutoring. So please, if you haven't done that already, go through your student email, your Coastal Pines email, and click that link so I can go ahead and add you to that particular roster on Teams. So we will go ahead and I will play this video that sort of, like I said, gives you a brief bio of who Virginia Woolf was as a woman, as a writer, and then we'll come back and kind of look at the actual essay itself and then talk a little bit more about that particular question that you're going to have to answer um, by this Sunday. And then we will also look at some of the other stuff in this week's folder.
Virginia Woolf was a writer concerned, above all, with capturing in words the excitement, pain, beauty, and horror of what she termed the modern age. Born in 1882, she was conscious of herself as a distinctively modernist writer, at odds with a raft of the staid and complacent assumptions of 19th century English literature. She realized that a new era, marked by extraordinary developments in urbanism, technology, warfare, consumerism, and family life, would need to be captured by a different sort of writer. Along with Joyce and Proust, she was a relentlessly creative writer in search of new literary forms that could do justice to the complexities of modern consciousness. Her books and essays retain a power to convey the thrill and drama of living in the 20th century. Woolf was born in London. Her father was a famous author and mountaineer, and her mother a well-known model. Her family hosted many of the most influential and important members of Victorian literary society. Woolf was largely cynical about these grand types, accusing them of pomposity and narrow-mindedness. Woolf and her sister weren't even allowed to go to Cambridge like their brothers, but had to steal an education from their father's study. After her mother died when she was only 13, Woolf had the first of a series of mental breakdowns that were to plague her for the rest of her life, partly caused, too, by the sexual abuse she suffered at the hands of her half-brother, George Duckworth. Despite her illness, she became a journalist and then a novelist, and a central figure in the Bloomsbury Group, which included John Maynard Keynes, E.M. Forster, and Lytton Strachey. She married one of the members, the writer and journalist Leonard Woolf. She and Leonard bought a small hand printing press, named it the Hogarth Press, and published books from their dining room. They printed Woolf's radical novels and political essays when no one else would, and they produced the first full English edition of Freud's works. In just 4 short years between World Wars I and II, Woolf wrote 4 of her most famous works: Mrs. Dalloway, To the Lighthouse, Orlando, and the essay A Room of One's Own. In March 1941, feeling the onset of another bout of mental illness, Woolf drowned herself in the River Ouse. Her work has many vital things to teach us. Woolf is one of the great observers of English literature. Perhaps the finest short piece of prose she ever wrote was the essay The Death of the Moth, published in 1942. It contains her observations as she sits in her study watching a humble moth trapped by a pane of glass. Rarely have so many profound thoughts been eked out from such an apparently minor situation, though for Woolf there were no such things as minor situations. One could not help watching him. One was, indeed, conscious of a queer feeling of pity for him. The possibilities of pleasure seemed that morning so enormous and so various that to have only a moth's part in life, and a day moth's at that, appeared a hard fate, and his zest in enjoying his meagre opportunities to the full, pathetic. He flew vigorously to one corner of his compartment, and after waiting there a second, flew across to the other. What remained for him but to fly to a third corner, and then to a fourth? That was all he could do, in spite of the width of the sky, the far-off smoke of houses, and the romantic voice, now and then, of a steamer out at sea. Woolf noticed everything that you and I tend to walk past: the sky, the pain in others' eyes, the games of children, the stoicism of wives, the pleasures of department stores, the interest of harbours and docks. Emerson, one of her favourite writers, may have been speaking generally, but he captured everything that makes Woolf special when he remarked, "In the work of a writer of genius we rediscover our own neglected thoughts." In another great essay, On Being Ill, Woolf lamented how seldom writers stoop to describe illness, an oversight that seemed characteristic of a snobbery against the everyday in literature. English, which can express the thoughts of Hamlet and the tragedy of Lear, has no words for the shiver and the headache. The merest schoolgirl, when she falls in love, has Shakespeare or Keats to speak her mind for her. But let a sufferer try to describe a pain in his head to a doctor, and language at once runs dry. This would be her mission. Woolf tried throughout her life to make sure language would do a better job at defining who we really are, with all our vulnerabilities, confusions, and bodily sensations. Woolf raised her sensitivity to the highest art form. She had the confidence and seriousness to use what happened to her, the sensory details of her own life, as the basis for the largest ideas. Woolf was always profound, but never afraid of what others called trivial. She was confident that the ambitions of her mind, to love beauty and engage with big ideas, were completely compatible with an interest in shopping, cakes, and hats, subjects on which she wrote with almost unique eloquence and depth. In another particularly good essay of hers, called The Oxford Street Tide, she celebrates the gaudy vulgarity of this huge London shopping street. The moralists point the finger of scorn at Oxford Street. It reflects, they say, the levity, the ostentation, the haste, and the irresponsibility of our age. Yet perhaps they are as much out in their scorn as we should be if we asked of the lily that it should be cast in bronze, or of the daisy that it should have petals of imperishable enamel. The charm of modern London is that it is not built to last, it is built to pass. In an accompanying essay, equally open to the unprestigious side of modern life, Woolf goes to visit the giant docks of London. 1,000 ships with 1,000 cargoes are being unladen every week, and not only is each package of this vast and varied merchandise picked up and set down accurately, but each is weighed and opened, sampled and recorded, and again stitched up and laid in its place, without haste or waste or hurry, or confusion by a very few men in shirt sleeves, who, working with the utmost organization in the common interest, are yet able to pause in their work and say to the casual visitor, "Would you like to see what sort of thing we sometimes find in sacks of cinnamon? Look at this snake." Woolf was deeply aware that men and women fit themselves into rigid roles, and as they do so, overlook their fuller personalities. In her eyes, in order to grow, we need to do some gender bending. We need to seek experiences that blur what it means to be a real man or a real woman. Woolf had a few lesbian affairs in her life, and she wrote a magnificently bold, queer text, Orlando, a portrait of her lover Vita, described as a nobleman who becomes a woman. She wrote, "It is fatal to be a man or woman pure and simple. One must be woman manly or man womanly." In her anti-war tract, 3 Guineas, Woolf argued that we will only ever end war by rethinking the habit of pitting of sex against sex. All this claiming of superiority and imputing of inferiority belong to the private school stage of human existence, where there are sides, and it is necessary for one side to beat another side, and of the utmost importance to walk up to a platform and receive from the hands of the headmaster a highly ornamental pot. Woolf wished desperately to raise the status of women in her society. She recognized that the problem was largely down to money. Women didn't have freedom, especially freedom of the spirit, because they didn't control their own income. Women have always been poor, she cried, not for 200 years merely, but from the beginning of time. Women have had less intellectual freedom than the sons of Athenian slaves. Women have not had a dog's chance of writing poetry. Her great feminist rallying cry, "A room of one's own," culminated in a specific political demand. In order to stand on the same intellectual footing as men, women needed not only dignity, but also equal rights to education, an income of £500 a year, and a room of one's own. Woolf was probably the best writer in the English language for describing our minds without the jargon of clinical psychology. The generation before hers, the Victorians, wrote novels focused on external details, city scenes, marriages, wills. Woolf envisaged a new form of expression that would focus instead on how it feels inside to know ourselves and other people. Books like Woolf's, which aren't overly sarcastic, aren't caught up in adventure plots or cradled in convention, are a contract. She's expecting us to turn down the outside volume, to try on her perspective, and to spend energy with subtle sentences. And in turn, she offers us the opportunity to notice the tremors we normally miss, and to better appreciate moths, our own headaches, and our fascinating and fluid sexualities. If you like this video, then I think you'll really appreciate Wisecrack, another fine channel on YouTube that also celebrates literature, philosophy.
All right, so turning our attention to the actual essay, let's talk a little bit about the death of the moth. And as the video says, basically, this particular essay is a life, a death, and our own mortality, right? It was published after she died in 1942. Is a brief but powerful essay transcending its simple subject matter through meticulous observation and poignant reflection. Woolf transforms the insignificant death of a moth into a profound meditation on life, death, and the human condition. Some key moments in the actual essay, we see Woolf observing a moth, fluttering around her window pane in September. Initially, she finds the creature sort of insignificant, right? She calls it a tiny bead of pure life. However, as she continues to watch the moth's ceaseless, futile struggle against the confines of the window, her perspective shifts a little bit, right? The moth embodies life's tenacious, even desperate will to endure. So again, we get this throughout this particular piece. Again, as you can tell, it's kind of short, um, which is good. I mean, it's a short narrative, which when we look at your particular topics for your narrative essay, yours needs to be sort of short as well. Um, this confirmation of seeing this particular moth sort of struggle to find life, Wolf's description of the vibrant life teeming outside her window, right? She looks outside the window and she sees life. She sees, the farmers, or she sees the trees, she sees the grass, she sees everything else that's sort of living that's going on, right? It's beautiful. It's a September afternoon or September morning. Things outside are actually living. The things inside sort of are having a hard time as it relates to the moth and possibly her too, because at this point, she was writing this up to the point where she basically went into the river there and committed suicide. Um, so possibly she sees a lot of herself in that particular moth. Um, we also see the contrast between the boundless energy of the natural world and the moth's confinement further emphasizes the creature's struggle. So again, what she sees on the outside is this boundless form of energy. People are working, people are playing, people are happy. Um, the moth, though, right, is seeing this light because moths are drawn to light, is trying to get out to experience the same boundless energy. It wants to fly its wings outside. It doesn't want to be confined inside the house. So that's why it keeps beating itself. Sort of, it eventually wears itself out because it beats itself to death basically up against this window pane. So again, going back to knowing what we know of Wolf, she was just, probably weeks, maybe days away before committing her own death. So she can possibly see a lot of connection between her and this creature. Maybe she, like the moth, is looking outside at this boundless forms of energy all around her. And she's calling out for help, doesn't really know how to call out for help. And she is sort of banging her head up against a metaphorical window as well. The essay reaches its climax as the moth, exhausted from its efforts, succumbs to death. Wolf's description of this moment is stark yet imbued with awe and respect. She recognizes the universality of death, a force that claims even the most tenacious of creatures. So she basically realizes, once we are born, our time is ticking. We only have a short, limited amount of time here on Earth. Sometimes it's natural causes that takes us out. Sometimes it's inflicted on the person doing the injury. Sometimes it's a sickness or a disease. But she realizes that whether you are a moth, a human, a piece of grass, eventually your time will come after you are born that you're going to have to succumb to death. Um, a lot of the major themes that we see in this particular essay, um, the fragility and tenacity of life, right? The moth's brief life and tiresome struggle embody both the preciousness and the precarious nature of existence. The inevitability of death. The essay acknowledges death as an integrated part of the life cycle, a force that claims all living things, which it does. The power of observation. Wolf's detailed description of the moth and its surroundings highlight the significance of even the most mundane aspects of life. I mean, you think about it. How many times do you go and you walk through, just walking outside, you might see a butterfly, or you might see a moth, or you might see a mosquito, or whatever that case may be. It is a living creature. It is a living thing. It has a birth and it has a death, just like humans do, just like we do. But how many times do we actually spend time to actually think about that particular creature's life? We like to kill spiders, right? Most of us don't like spiders. Definitely, we don't like cockroaches in the house. Again, they are a part of life. They're part of nature. They are a creature. They are born and they die. A lot of times, those creatures, spiders, mosquitoes, and cockroaches, usually have a very short life if they come domestically into our environment. Um, but how many times do we actually think about the life of a cockroach? We usually don't, right? We have other things to do. But again, she's taking the time to think about this poor, helpless moth. And a lot of people may think, why don't she just grab it or open the window or sort of take it outside? She doesn't really, she just sort of watches it, right? Sort of watches it basically kill itself by banging it up against that particular window pane. In a lot of ways, going back knowing what we know about her life, maybe, she thinks that other people around her are basically watching her do the same with her own life, with what was going on with her mental state, right? She had, various breakdowns throughout her life. Maybe she felt helpless in that. Uh, Nobody really came to her defense. Another major theme is the search for meaning in the transient world. Through a contemplation of the moth's death, Woolf grapples with existential questions about the meaning and purpose of life in the face of the inevitable mortality. Right? So, I mean, a lot of these questions we still see and we still ask and we still have today. What is life? That's, a lot of folks ask that question. It's the same thing as, well, what is life? What is death? What is love? We all have our different definitions and different answers to that question. And a lot of times it depends on, our age, where we are in life, what we have achieved, experience. Sometimes our answers change as we mature and as we get older. Sometimes they stay the same. Some of the literary techniques that Wolf uses in this essay that you could possibly use in your own narrative, especially if you had any high school literature classes, you probably have heard of some of these terms that I'm fixing to talk about. One is her use of vivid imagery and description. I know when we get into essay two, we're going to be more or less writing a descriptive essay at that point. But you're going to see a lot of times, especially when you're reading narrative pieces, especially The Death of the Moth, good writers will blend in narration and description. They usually go hand in hand, meaning you can't just have a narrative without some description, and you really can't have a description paper without some narrative. So you want to be careful. Yes, with the narrative, you're basically what a narrative is telling a story. So you're sort of telling me a story when you're starting on that first essay that you're going to have to do. It usually has a beginning, middle, and end, but you can include description. Think about going to see a movie or watch a TV show. If you took out the setting, if you took out um, the colors, if you took out a lot of the stuff that describes sort of the environment that that particular character or group of people are in, you're just left with words. That wouldn't be a very good movie to go to, or a very good 30-minute television show or an hour television show when you take out, everything. If you remove the setting, if you remove all the music, basically if you remove a lot of the folks too, you're just left with the speaker and they're just sort of talking into an empty space, right? It's black. There's no setting around them. Um, so think about integrating some descriptive words in your particular narrative because Wolf's sensory details here allow the reader to experience the scene alongside her, heightening the emotional impact of the moth's death. So, in a lot of ways, we are sort of, as you're reading this, should be sitting in the same chair that Wolf is, looking out at this particular moth by her sensory details. And what I mean by sensory details, really, it's the smells, the taste, the touch, um, those particular words that detail the particular scene that's happening because her scene is basically inside her house. right? It's she's sitting in this chair, she's looking out toward this window. She sees this little creature, the moth, sort of beating up against the pane, and then in the distance, she's able to see the life that's going on outside. That's basically her scene. She's not going to different cities or a beach or, the bedroom or nothing like that. She's basically sort of in this, maybe you could call living room, maybe dining room type area, and that's it. Metaphor and symbolism. The moth is a metaphor for life itself. Its struggles reflect our battles against limitation and mortality. So that moth is sort of could represent us in a lot of different ways. Um, it does reflect our particular battles that we have on a day-to-day basis, a weekly basis, possibly a yearly basis. It sort of reflects our own limitations. And eventually, we all at some point, if you're born, you're going to die. Um, that's just the natural cycle of life. Wolf likes to integrate this particular literary term called stream of consciousness, meaning when you try to read some of her work, sometimes you kind of have to go back and reread it a couple times. Sometimes it's best to read it out loud because what stream of consciousness does in this particular essay is a free flowing style mirrors the natural progression of Woolf's thoughts and observations. So when you read this piece, you're actually sort of reading it as if she's playing it out inside her mind. Sometimes it lacks the punctuation because her thoughts are moving so fast that it just sort of spills out on paper that way. Um, Shifting perspectives. Wolf moves seamlessly between the detached observation and deeply personal reflection, inviting the reader to engage with her involving thoughts of life and death, which that usually pairs up really well with that stream of consciousness approach that she takes. So, in conclusion, The Death of the Moth is a testament of Virginia Woolf's literary genius and her ability to find profound meaning in everyday occurrences. Through her masterful use of language and evocative imagery, she elevates the death of the moth into a poignant exploration of our shared humanity and the enduring mysteries of life and death, which she really does. And it's a really powerful piece. Um, so I hope you kind of got something out of that when you read that particular piece. We will look, let me shift gears here and let me go back to the actual question so I can show everybody where that's at in case you're having some issues. So again, you're going to be able to find the question right here, right? You click on it. It says create submission. It says upload file. I would suggest that you can create a submission, but the deal is if you're wanting to try to practice the Microsoft Word style, I would definitely, type your answer out into a Microsoft Word document because you have the benefit of using the spell check and the grammar check in case you have some issues there. You can go ahead and possibly resolve those before turning in the final submission. But this is the particular question right here that you have to answer. And it really deals with the fifth paragraph. She asked a rhetorical question, what had happened there? I give you the page number. Um, if you want to cite, you probably want to cite, take some quotations from the actual essay to sort of um, back up your particular points. There is, I will show you how to kind of do that here momentarily, or I will upload some stuff because I know usually we don't get into the citation aspect of the course until we get into the research paper, but you may need to use particular aspects from the essay, as far as quotations to back up your particular point. You don't have to necessarily write or use a whole lot of them. Really, what you need to do here, some folks will say, well, how long does it need to be? I would say I would keep it within about 250 words, which is about a page if you're doing the whole double spacing Microsoft Word type deal. And then, whatever you saved your file as, if you saved it as a Microsoft Word document, you just click here and this little box is going to drop down. You want to click on the plagiarism tool because we do have a plagiarism checker called SafeAssign. You have to click that to be able to move on. And then you want to browse your local files. And that's basically what did you save it as? So I'm going to just click on this random. If there's nothing here that's attached, when you hit submit, then you're just going to submit a blank document. Something has to be attached here. If you decide to go the other route, which again, you can go that route if you want, which is basically create a submission, you're not really going to have the opportunity to use spell check and grammar check. It does have a spell check, but that's about it. And you would have to type your particular answer within this text box. The problem with that is it's hard to mimic the MLA 9 style that you would need to do for an essay because it just doesn't have that capability. Sometimes when you look at it on your end, it may look fine, but when I open it up, it may, your paragraphs may be, 2 or 3 spaces off to the right somewhere. So you just want to be careful about using this text box, but you can go either way if you want. Again, this needs to be in by 11:59 this Sunday at midnight. This disappears and it will grade it as a 0 if there's nothing there. So this is your particular question. Wolf's question urges us as readers to pause and see the shift from the energetic external world to the moss struggle and imminent death. So again, the natural world on the outside of the window compared to the life that's happening inside the window, which is basically the moth trying to get out, but flapping its wings and basically exhausting. So how does the question lure us to reflect on basically the fleeting aspects of life and impact of such a simple observation? So again, once you read the actual essay, you can kind of, have a better understanding of how to bring some of this together. A lot of this could be, taking your own personal, experience and aspects of this as well. So that's really what's due for this week. As you can tell, I've already put up the assignment for Modular 2. Next week, it deals with your narrative essay, your rough draft. And with that in mind, let's look at what narration is, the purpose of it. We will come back and look at how to format your essay in MLA 9 form, and we will look at the actual essay topic. So let's look at the purpose of narrative writing. And it's going to take a minute because our internet here. So while tries to load up, we already sort of talked briefly about what narrative and narration means, right? Narration means the art of storytelling, and the purpose of your particular narrative essay is to really tell a story based on one of those topics. Now, your story, as it says here, a narrative can be factual or fictional. So that's true with those essay topics. If you don't want to get too personal, don't want to give out too much of your information, that's fine. You can make your particular narrative essay a fictional essay if you like. As long as it sort of fits the criteria of what needs to be done, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that here as we go through this. A fictional story is one that's based on and tries to be faithful to actual events as they unfold in real life. Sort of like the Wolf piece, that's more of a non-fictional narrative. A fictional story is made up, imagined story. When writing is a fictional story, we can create characters and events to best fit our story. So a fictional story could be anything, think about maybe your favorite movie, Star Wars, that's fictional. Um, Star Trek's fictional. A lot of the movies that we see are basically fictional in nature. There should be a purpose. Um, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here momentarily about purpose, point of view, content. You can make, depending on the topic that you choose, and again, we're going to look at those topics here in a minute. Uh, your particular narrative could be filled with laughter. It could be filled with sympathy, empathy, fear, anger, hatred, sadness. You can have sort of a blend of those throughout, depending on what your particular topic is. Again, this is sort of an exercise. You don't necessarily have to do these, but this could be a good exercise if you're having trouble with writer's block to sort of get your creative juices going. If you want to read through this and sort of do something with there. Um, the structure of a narrative essay, you might want to pay attention to some of these transitional words and phrases because they express time. Generally, when you write a narrative piece, you're talking about something that's happened in the past. So you're going to be using past tense verbs, right? It's hard to give a narrative in the future tense, and it's really kind of hard to give a narrative in the present tense unless you're currently writing your essay at this moment and going through that process. Generally, the basic components of a narrative is plot, the events as they unfold in sequence, right? First, second, third, A, B, C, one, two, three. You usually go in that particular organization in that order because narration is usually linear. It's not non-linear. You might have watched some non-linear films or read some non-linear stories or novels, and that's generally where they start in one place and then they sort of go back and forth. Um, think of it like Back to the Future, but it's sort of screwed up Back to the Future. Um, be careful of the whole non-linear aspect. Generally, if you're not comfortable really writing, if you have a hard time writing, I wouldn't go non-linear. I would stick linear. Really, point one, point two, point three, to sort of tell your story. That way you're not confusing your reader, which, besides your peers next week would be me, ultimately, because I'm going to be the one that reads and grades it. But also, it could kind of screw you up as the writer because you may forget where you came from or where you went in that particular piece. And you may be, you may have the problem of going back and, basically repeating what you've already said. Characters, the people who inhibit the story and move it forward. Typically, there are minor characters and main characters. The minor characters generally play supporting roles to the main character or the protagonist. So usually in your narration, because yours, I believe, only needs to be about 2 to 3 pages, we will reconfirm that here momentarily with the assignment sheet. You're going to be one of those characters. You're probably going to be the main character protagonist because it is a narration. It should be sort of about you. You can add other characters, but be careful. Again, we're not writing a screenplay. We're not turning this into a Shakespearean play where you have 1,500 characters and 2,000 of them or whatever die, because you're only going to have 2 to 3 pages to basically tell the story. So if you do include characters with dialogue, again, I can show you how to style that. If you need to style dialogue, there is a certain way to do it. I would probably limit the characters to maybe 2 or 3 beside yourself. I wouldn't get too many going because it's difficult sometimes with 2 to 3 pages as your limit to really work a lot of that in there. Conflict, usually with any good story, whether it's a movie, television show, novel, essay, short story, there's going to be some conflict. The primary problem or obstacle that unfolds in the plot that the protagonist must solve or overcome by the end of that narrative. The way in which the protagonist resolves the conflict or the plot results in the theme of the narrative. And then again, your theme is the ultimate message the narrative is trying to express. It can be either explicit or implicit. So as you go through this, and again, there is an example here, and I'm not going to read through all this, but this is a really good narrative, A quality paper that they have basically published here. I would read through that again. It's not necessarily because it's on the website. It's not in the proper MLA form, right? It's not, indenting the paragraphs like it should. It's not double spaced. But, if this essay would be on a Microsoft Word document and in the proper MLA style, this would probably be about 2 to 3 pages. You have a couple other narrative alternatives if you want to try to look these up online. Hopefully you can find them without having to pay, but here's a couple other professional narratives that you can kind of look at. People that have, wrote these, published these, and got money for them. So that's a good, two more examples besides the wolf piece. So, you really have a potential of having 4 examples of a narrative paper here. And I would take advantage of that. All right, so shifting gears, let's actually look at the topic. For your particular, and I know this thing is, I'm trying to keep it within an hour. So some of the other stuff we may just briefly touch on. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Some stuff has the videos that accompany it, especially in the grammar section. So I just wanted to really, hit the high notes with the actual assignment 1 this week, and then talk a little bit about your major essay, the first one that's coming up, and then also highlight sort of the peer review, which we'll definitely be talking about next week. So while this comes up, so once you download that, this is the essay that you're going to have to draft, have a rough draft for by 11:59 next Wednesday, which I believe next Wednesday is the 28th. The final draft of this is going to be due on Tuesday, September 3rd. So if you look from today, you basically have, if you count this week, 3 weeks to do the rough draft and then turn in basically your final draft, the one that you really want me to grade. So if you look here, here's sort of the parameters. MLA 9 double space times New Roman 12 format. It needs to be 2 to 3 pages or 500 to 750 words, whichever comes first to you. Again, the rough draft is going to be due for a peer review by next Wednesday. And then the final draft is going to be due after Labor Day, which would be that Tuesday, September 3rd. So these are the 5 topics, right? You get to choose one of these and write on it. Again, it could be just like we talked about earlier. It could be fictional, can be non-fictional, depending on how you want to go with it. If you choose to be fictional, you need to be fictional all the way through. If you choose to be non-fictional, you need to be non-fictional all the way through. You don't want to mix and match a lot of those. A moment of transformation. Again, you can kind of read the little aspects of that here. Crossing cultural borders, facing fears, conquering a personal challenge, unexpected connections, and lessons from failure. I've had students over the last few semesters basically do all 5 of these. Generally, a lot of folks do number 1, they do number 3, and they do number 5. 2 and 4 sometimes become a challenge, but I've seen really good essays that students have written with 2 and 4. Now, usually what I say is if you read these 5 essay topics and you don't like any of them, if you have something better that you want to do that fits the narrative, right, that you can tell a story and do it 2 to 3 pages, email me before you start doing the rough draft, just so I know where you're going, what your topic is, because nothing's going to be more frustrating when you think you have a really good topic in your head. And if you go ahead and start typing that stuff up for a rough draft and you get to the point where only got 250 pages, well, that's only 1 page. It needs to be 2 to 3 pages. I can't get any more. Well, it's because of your topic. And had you sent me an email and we started discussing your topic, I probably would have came to that conclusion before you even started doing all that work, that you're probably only going to have about a page and you're not going to have any more ideas to go from there. Now, sometimes if you get to that point, that's where the characters come into play. You can have the characters sort of do the dialogue back and forth to sort of extend that story a little bit. But you want to be careful that you're not letting, again, we're not writing a drama here. This is a narrative. You're telling a story. We still need to have your voice in it. Um, so hopefully you will, start brainstorming, and we'll talk a little bit more about, how to do some of that here momentarily. But these are your 5 choices. You can always go to Google and type in, again, if you're having a hard time brainstorming a topic and you don't like mine, type in narrative essay topics. And you're going to have some here that you can kind of use possibly. Some of them may be overlapping. You have other websites. Here's like 500 supposedly. Probably way more than you need. But again, if you're having a hard time brainstorming something on your own, you don't like my 5, you got 500 here you can kind of choose from. The thing is, whatever topic you choose, just don't pick like 2 or 3 topics and sort of blend them together. Pick one main topic and sort of go from there. Because otherwise it's just going to be, it's going to drive you nuts. Let's look. Moving to the grammar, there's a couple videos here. We can kind of briefly look at those. If you click on the hyperlinks here for the week 1, it's going to take you to a couple readings. I would definitely look at those, especially if you have issues with fragments, run-ons, or comma splices. If you need additional help from, more than what these 2 videos are giving you, there's some practice there that you can kind of do. Again, if you want to do some of the practice grammar, and you want me to kind of check and make sure that you're doing it right, just send me an email, give me whatever answer you have, make sure you include the page number of the problem so I can find it, and I will check it for you. Because you don't want to make these in your essays. You don't you don't want to have fragments, run-ons, and comma splices in your week 1 assignment either. So let's look at this particular video. It's very brief, and then it should tell you how to fix a run-on, comma splice, and fragment as well.
Google AI helps you find your best customers by optimizing your campaigns in real time. Just set your specific goals and
Welcome to Grammar Flip. We give a hoot about grammar.
You can also correct them by inserting a semicolon. That's only if these are 2 independent clauses. Or you can use a combination of a comma and a coordinating conjunction. Very important that the comma and the coordinating conjunction are both used. You would not use just a comma. It's got to be both the comma and the coordinating conjunction. So those are 3 ways to correct run-on sentences. Add a period, add a semicolon, or add a coordinating conjunction and a comma. All right, let's look at comma splices. What's a comma splice? Well,
Visit grammarflip.com for video lessons, practice.
Well, that's kind of a short video. Let's see. Let's look at the positives real quick.
Hello, grammarians, and hello, Paige.
Hi, David.
So today we're going to be talking about the appositive, which is just a monster of a word, right? And I can tell you that from my limited study of Latin, right, it comes from ad positio, which is like putting on, which doesn't really necessarily help. What is this thing? Like, what is this device? How do we use it? And what does it have to do with commas?
That is a great question. So the definition itself is also kind of confusing, but it'll make a lot of sense when we see some examples.
Okay.
My older sister, Griselda, is going to college in the fall.
Okay, so an appositive, what is the definition of an appositive then?
So it is a noun phrase that clarifies or redefines its antecedent.
And an antecedent is just something that comes before. So what we're doing here with Griselda is we are redefining or clarifying who my older sister is.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to do that, we're putting it between these commas like so, voop, voop. And we're just saying it again. My older sister, Griselda, is going to college in the fall.
Right.
But it doesn't always have to be in the middle like this, right?
That's true. It can be, say, at the end. So they stopped selling my favorite snack, the cookie cat.
I am so sorry.
I know, it's so sad.
So we've got this apposition then at the end of the sentence.
Right.
So my favorite snack is being redefined or clarified by cookie cat.
Yeah, exactly.
Or rather, cookie cat is clarifying or redefining my favorite snack.
Right. I could just say they stopped selling my favorite snack.
And that could just be its own sentence, right?
Totally.
They stopped selling my favorite snack. My older sister is going to college in the fall. Like, this stuff isn't essential to the understanding of the sentence.
Right. But if you don't know what my favorite snack is, then it's kind of helpful to say, or it's helpful for me to say the cookie cat.
So you can use them as in the first sentence, my older sister, comma, Griselda, comma, is going to college in the fall, or you can use it as in the second sentence, they stopped selling my favorite snack, comma, the cookie cat, period.
Right. You don't need another comma.
Right.
At the end.
Let's change that back into a comma. So this is just another illustration of the separating power of the comma, because we're using it to set off this explanatory, clarifying element in the middle or at the end of these sentences.
Yeah, exactly. That's what the comma does. Man, it seems like commas can do, like, anything.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. You know what else can do anything?
What?
The viewer. You, the viewer. You can learn anything. That's the appositive and how it relates to commas. David out.
Page out.
So that's the positives in a nutshell.
Hey, grammarians. Hey, Paige.
Hi, David.
So we're going to
Move away from this. Let's see here. Again, week 2 stuff. If you feel confident and you want to go ahead and move ahead into week 2, there's some information here that you can kind of click on, and that will take you to some readings in the actual textbook. Just like you have here, you have some pages here you want to look at. Let me know if you need additional help with some of the grammar stuff, so you're not having issues with this in your writings, especially in the essays. The other thing is too, when you're doing your rough drafts of your paper, right? You're doing it for your peer review, but if you also want to send me a draft to have me look at it, maybe before or after the peer review, so you can improve whatever your peers have told you to improve, but you also need another second opinion. I don't mind looking at it. You have to email it to my Postal Pines email account as a Microsoft Word attachment, so I can put comments and suggestions in the margins to help you get the best possible grade. Again, it's optional. I will say students who sent me drafts in the past, and sometimes it had to be multiple drafts to get whatever grade they wanted to get. Because I can tell you, your first draft is not going to be anything really above a C. So that's the whole process of the writing process, is you have to go through multiple drafts. Now, some folks, they like to have a C. That's fine. If you don't want to do, additional drafts multiple times, and I guess you could be happy with a C. But for folks that want to get A's and B's, you have to go through some drafts to be able to get that. So you can send me a draft. I'd recommend that you send it days before the actual final draft is going to be due, just so I can give you enough time. I can give you constructive feedback. Because otherwise, if you try to send it to me 6 hours before it's due, I may or may not get a chance to read it. And if I do read it, it's going to be rushed. So I'm definitely probably going to miss some stuff if you do it, 6 hours before due date or 3 hours before due date. So just be mindful of that. And again, like I said, I was going to try to keep this to be around 1 hour, but we may be going over a little bit, and that's fine, being that it is the first week. So let me see here. I'm going to go to Becoming a Successful Writer. We're going to kind of go through some of this. This is earlier stuff in your Modular 1. Again, I'm not going to read this whole page. We're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be a successful writer, and that is writing to think and communicate. Usually, if you read good material, good authors, usually that sort of rubs off onto you and helps you become a better writer. There is a lot of crap out there. I'm sure you've read a lot of it. You know, you read it daily on Facebook, you read it at certain news sites, blogs. There's good crap and there's bad crap. We really want you to sort of stay away from the bad crap as it relates to the writing. Um, so you can be a better writer when you leave in December than you came in here in August. That's sort of my goal. That's the purpose, to make you a better writer, academic writer, because you will need to use these skills in other classes. This is not going to be the only class you're going to write. This is probably not going to be the only class you're going to have a research paper in. If you have aspirations of getting a bachelor's or a master's or a doctorate degree at some point in your life, you're going to have to be able to use your writing skills to get those grades, to argue your points. Because at some point along the way, quizzes and tests, they still may be there, but eventually they sort of get further and further in the background. They're looking at your analytical and, um, you know, they're looking at your analytical writing. They're looking at your analytical thinking. A lot of that stuff, I mean, you're going to have to write more, which means probably more research papers. So it's best to know the tools of the trade now so you're not lost later, especially let's say you go to Valdosta or Georgia Southern or Emory. It doesn't matter whether you stay in Georgia, if you go to California, if you go to England, writing is writing. They're, at the college level, they're going to expect that you know how to do it and do it well. So hopefully, depending on where you went to high school and how long it's been, maybe your high school English teachers have taught you properly how to do some of this stuff. Sometimes, lately it seems, especially because of COVID and everybody had to do the quarantine learn for about a year there. A lot of this writing stuff is sort of got hidden somewhere in the cache files of that particular Google Classroom. So some folks didn't get all the material they needed to be a successful writer moving forward. So I'm hoping within these 15 or 16 weeks, we're able to dust off some of those cobwebs that you've, possibly should have learned back in elementary and middle school and high school, and get you back up to where you need to be as it relates to a strong, successful academic writer. Writer's block. Some folks think it's a mess. Some folks believe in it. Depending on how you take it, one way or a couple ways that you can overcome writer's block is don't procrastinate. Again, we talked about this on a previous video. Procrastination is not going to be your tag team partner here. If anything, it's going to make things worse when it comes to online classes, whether it's a English class, psychology class, history class, or religion class, Spanish class, math class. Procrastination in in-person classes don't work. We know what procrastination is when we're not even in school. You may procrastinate to go to the grocery store. Well, if it's going to rain later that day and you procrastinate until it starts raining, well, now you're going to get drenched. Or maybe you get to the grocery store and realize you only have 5 minutes and they're about to close. You're not going to be able to go through and get a buggy's full worth of stuff. If you procrastinate on paying a phone bill, let's say a cell phone bill, what happens? Well, eventually they cut you off and they may charge you extra to get that thing turned back on. The same thing with rent. If you procrastinate paying your rent, you can get evicted. And that's not good to have all your stuff out in the street the very next day, and now you're trying to find a place. Where can you go? Everything is kind of high these days, and there's not a lot of options, especially last minute. You're going to try to pile all your stuff into the local Motel 6. That could be kind of difficult. Try free writing without guilt. That's basically just getting all your ideas down on a particular piece of paper. You might set a time, 10, 15 minutes. You're not worrying about spelling. You're not worrying about, grammar and punctuation, anything like that. You're just sort of throwing up, let's say, for argument's sake, all your ideas that's going on in your head about your particular topic. You're just throwing them down on paper. Follow your inspiration, right? think about, a lot of things that inspire you. It could be music, have a little bit of music playing in the background, have a cup of coffee, something of that nature. Maybe a particular picture of a loved one, your daughter, your son, your husband, your wife, whatever the case may be. Get in a quiet area where there's not a lot of distraction going on. Some folks can't work with the TV blaring. Some folks can work with the TV down. I mean, it all depends on what type of learner and what type of writer you really are. Break the writing project into parts. That would probably be helpful as we get later in the semester when we're having to write longer papers, especially like the research paper. But the 2 to 3 page narrative, you shouldn't, I mean, if you're going to break that one in parts, I would say maybe, start on the beginning, do that one day. The next day, start on the middle. And then the third day, do the conclusion. Wrap it all up by the fourth day, and you already have your draft written. Now it's just going back and modifying, tweaking up, checking spelling and grammar, sending me drafts if you want, and also getting ready to upload by next Wednesday the rough draft to the discussion board so a peer would be able to download that paper, read it, and then use the assignment sheet that I have provided on that particular assignment to go through it and give you feedback to help you improve so you can go back and really revise for the final draft, the one that you want me to eventually give you a final grade on. Always review the assignment, reread the instructions multiple times if need be. Email me, call me, use the Teams link that, some of y'all have already I'm added to. Ask me a question there. There's a little text box. You can ask me a question. We can set up a Teams meeting, sort of like what we're doing here with the video. We can do in-person tutoring, whatever the case may be. I'm here to help you, try to make your life a little easier when it comes to this course. But again, I can't read minds. So if you're struggling, you're going to have to speak up. Because I'm going to assume if you're not sending me an email, if you're not sending me something via Teams, if you're not coming to tutoring, that you know what you're doing. So if you're struggling, you need to verbalize that to me, either in an email, phone call, something. Verbalize your idea. You can talk to your classmates. Now, being that it's online, that could be kind of difficult. You can email if you have an email some classmates in this particular class. If you're taking in-person classes, you can possibly, volley your ideas off to a peer, another friend, another student, family member. You can talk to somebody about your ideas out loud, possibly. Even record yourself. We all have a cell phone. It has a option where you can record your voice. Speaking of that, and then play it back and kind of hear yourself, hear your own thoughts. By doing that, sometimes that's, some of us are visual learners, some of us are auditorial, and then some of us have to see the print. So if you use sort of those three methods, it possibly will break down something for you that will work for your particular paper. Visualize a friendly audience, right? We're not here to dog you on your writing. We're not here to challenge you as it relates to did this happen or did not happen. I'm not going to fact check you. We're all here to become better learners, better readers, better writers. So the purpose of the essays in this course is to help you craft and nurture that particular skill so you can take it forth. If you have kids coming up in school, eventually they're going to be where you're at now. They're going to have to write book reports. They're going to have to write essays, research papers. So you can take what I'm teaching you to teach them. And by doing so, you're basically relearning this stuff over yourself. So it's sort of like a circle that will go around. I mean, you're festering and promoting education at all levels at that point. And it will be a beneficial, especially to, your younger kids or nieces or nephews, because you may not have had somebody to take the time to actually help you with your writing. Now you have that time, I hope, because I'm giving you some knowledge. You can take that knowledge and your own experience and give it to somebody else and tell and show them what it means and how you should be able to become a better academic writer, let's say at the 9th grade level, instead of, having to go to college and learn it. Because if you teach them now in the 9th grade, they will develop that, strengthen that through the next 3 years. So by the time they get to be a freshman in college where you're at, they won't have as many, I hope, as many problems and issues. Take a break, obviously. If you have multiple classes going on, you want to take a break. Don't try to write this paper out, 2 to 3 pages. A lot of folks say that's really easy. That's shorter. That's not as lengthy as 7 or 8 pages. Yes, it is. That's true. Sometimes you just have the inspiration, the urge to go ahead and get all 2 or 3 pages down. If you do, fine, great. But I would recommend that you're taking breaks, especially if you got multiple classes, especially if you got, work, you got other obligations outside of school. Don't try to cram a lot of this stuff in all in, 2 hours. It probably is not going to work out too well for you. Change of location. Obviously, that makes sense. If you can't, let's say the bedroom is too distracting because you got a lot of stuff on the wall or whatever the case may be, go to the kitchen. Kitchen's too distracting, go to the living room. You got to find your own little niche as it relates into the house, what works best, what time works best. Sometimes people, some, famous writers used to write at night. Some folks, wrote standing up on, putting a magnet in their paper on the refrigerator and sort of writing that way. Some folks write really well during the afternoon, in the morning. You're just going to have to figure out what works best with you. Again, if you got young kids, at night and in the morning may not be the best. You may have to do it sometime when they're asleep or at school or whatever the case may be. If your work schedule doesn't really match with your school schedule, you kind of have to work around both of that. And sometimes that can be stressful. I know because there's been times I've had to take, when I was a student, take my own work to work at times, thinking I was going to get stuff done. A lot of times I don't get anything done because it's work. And they don't necessarily understand, hey, I got a paper to write when you got to throw up stock or cook something, right? So just be mindful of your location, selecting the appropriate voice. In this particular narrative writing, you can use first person pronouns, I, my, me, we, that's plural version. Where you want to be careful in academic writing is you generally want to stick with first and third person pronouns. You never really want to use second person pronouns, which are you, your, because you're not necessarily talking to your audience. And it just makes your writing informal. Now, if you are quoting somebody or if you are using a character that uses you in dialogue, that's fine, but you just don't want to use you in unless you're writing a particular, like a process paper, which, we'll talk about that later. We're not writing a process here. You're doing a narrative. So you can't go wrong by using first or third. I would be careful as we move forward because you're going to be more wanting to do objective writing instead of subjective. This is more subjective here because it's a personal narrative about you. But at some point you want to turn the focus more to third person pronouns. And we'll talk about when that's going to be more of appropriate need. All right, so that's pretty much this first section. Purpose and audience, we're going to briefly go through. You probably already know this. The purpose, the reason the writer composes the essay, besides saying, hey, he's wanting me to write this narrative essay, I need to do it to get a good grade. There's got to be a deeper purpose. And it really boils down to picking your topic, right? I'm not going to tell you which topic to choose. That's why I gave you those choices. If you don't like my choices, fine. I'm not offended by it. But you need to find something that's going to fit the genre of the narrative writing. Audience, the individual or group whom the writer intends to address. Well, collectively, it's going to be the class and me. But you might want to think about universal audience. If you publish this on Facebook, like your essay on Facebook or a blog page, and if somebody in India decided to read it at 4 o'clock in the morning, if they knew English, they should be able to relate to that particular personal narrative because again, it's telling a story that could be universal in nature, meaning just because it happened to you in Savannah, Georgia, doesn't mean it couldn't happen to somebody else in Tokyo, Japan. It's just a different location, different place. Tone, the attitude the writer conveys about the essay subject. Again, we talked a little bit about that. Do you want it to be a happy story, a sad story, somewhere in between? And then think about the content. The content's the actual substance of the particular 2 to 3 pages. Is it appropriate? Is it non-appropriate? Does it fit the elements of what a narrative it needs to be? Meaning, does it have a beginning, middle, and end? Is it more, does it tell a story more so than really describe one? That type deal. Other things that you want to look at when it deals with academic purposes of writing, the reasons for writing typically fulfill the 4 main purposes: to summarize, to analyze, to synthesize, and to evaluate. Again, this becomes an issue as we move from essay 1 to essay 2. To entertain, to inform, to persuade, or other ones we will talk about. Definitely keep your audience in mind. Think about demographics of your audience, right? Is it, think about religious beliefs, think about genders, male, female, Christian, Buddhist. Think of ages. Are they, 5-year-old? Is it a preteen, a teenager, young adult, somebody in their 40s, grandma, grandpa, mom or dad, that type deal? Education. What's the level of education that your audience primarily makes up, which in our case would be high school to college level, really. There could be some folks in there a little bit, already have some knowledge at other particular institutions. I mean, you're thinking about, when you're in this college class, you're not going to be dealing with a bunch of 12-year-olds. So your language and your structure shouldn't be gauged for somebody that's a 6th grader, really. I mean, you want to use clear and concise language that a 6th grader would be able to understand, but at the same time, you don't want to insult your audience intelligence by writing sentences that, a 6th grader would write. You want to spice that up a little bit. You want to use language that sort of fits the particular topic, that type deal. Prior knowledge, right, really is your personal experience. Everybody has prior knowledge on certain things that you can bring into some of your writing if need be. And then expectations. Be careful of trying to do too much too soon, right? Like I said, don't think that you have to, this rough draft is due next Wednesday. It's basically like 8 days away, so I got to really rush and get this stuff done. Take your time. You have time to space out. If you don't procrastinate, you can do page 1 today, page 2 tomorrow. If you only need 2 pages, you're done. If you need to go to 3 page, you can do page 1 today, page 2 tomorrow, page 3. By Thursday, starting Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, all of that, you have time to start spell checking, grammar checking, editing, sending me drafts. So it really depends on how you manage your time, is how well you're going to be, feeling from 1 week to the next. You don't have to feel stressed or rushed. Usually if you feel that way, it's because something on your end is causing that. Because I'm giving you a good bit of time to get a lot of this stuff accomplished within a week, couple weeks, right? You want to select the appropriate tone. Again, it depends on your particular topic. Choosing the appropriate, interesting content, again, usually depends on your topic. And you can kind of take away here the key takeaways. Real quick, pre-writing techniques, brainstorming, right? You might want to jot down what your purpose is, who your audience is. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about doing Pre-writing, you can do free writing, which we just talked about. You can do asking questions. You can do listing. Sort of think about a listing like if you do a list to go grocery shopping, it's the same deal. You can do clustering or idea maps. You can use Venn diagrams. You've probably seen those in an algebra class. This gives you pretty much good examples of each, the asking questions, the who, what, where, when, why, and how, more or less the journalistic questions as they are usually called when you're dealing with like newspaper writing, that type deal. Listing, here's a good list. Idea mapping, you probably heard of the bubble maps or the cluster maps or the double bubbles. You probably use a lot of those in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, maybe even earlier. You can still use some of that stuff that you learned back then to help you here. What I would suggest is whatever you did in high school, middle school, and elementary school as it relates to your writing, if it didn't get you the grade that you wanted, meaning it didn't give you the A or the B, chances are that's not going to work for you at the college level. So I wouldn't even try to do that stuff because otherwise you're just going to get sort of the similar grades or lower grades. So if something is broke and it was broke back then, you need to try to fix it now. So you need to sort of experiment with something else that's going to make you be successful to give you the A's or give you the B's or give you a passing grade. Because you're going to know what works and what doesn't work. And if what you did in 11th grade in your English class gave you C's and D's most of the time, don't do it in this class because chances are it's going to give you D's and F's. So try to find something that's going to work for you. Experiment with something different. You have a little bit of time. If you use time wisely, you can experiment with things to find something that's going to work for you and give you the grade that you want. I think really that's it as it relates to, yeah, that's pretty much it. Let me see. Again, you can go ahead and start moving into modular 2 or week 2 if you want. I will have a video about that probably next week. Oh, let me just briefly talk. I know we're running a little over this. We will come back to this a lot more next week. But if you want to go ahead, if some of you are already drafting and getting this stuff going, what you're going to have to do as it relates to the peer review next week and the discussion board, you're going to have to click here. And as you tell, I already have the review questions here, so I'll click there here in a minute. But to get to this part and to get your stuff uploaded, you're going to have to create a thread first. Until you create that thread, you can't upload your rough draft and you can't read anybody else's. So you have to hit this button to create the thread. Basically, it's going to, if I did that, this is what it's going to look like. You're just going to have to go down here, type in, I would say rough draft. Again, I wouldn't copy and paste your essay in here because you can, but it's hard to give comments back on that sometimes. You're going to have to hit this plus button. You're going to have to insert your local file. Again, I would go ahead and type this stuff on using Microsoft Word and using the MLA format. And I will show you again where you can find a template. There is a video, I believe, in this week that shows you how to also find Microsoft Word. But you're going to have to upload your file as a Microsoft Word file so we can download it and read it. So once you initially upload your essay, hopefully if everybody sort of uses their time wisely, more folks will put their essay up before the Wednesday deadline. And the problem with that, the reason why I'm doing that is instead of a Sunday, is because if you had the essay or the rough draft due on the September 1st, which is Sunday, you are only going to have 2 days to fix whatever you need to fix to get the grade that you want before you submit the final grade or final draft on the 3rd. So that only gives you 2 days. The reason why I've said that, the 28th is that would give everybody the 29th, the 30th, the 31st, the 1st, and the 2nd to revise whatever they need to revise. So if you can start uploading your rough drafts as soon as, let's say, the end of this week, right, the 24th to 25th, that will still give people enough time to pick Because otherwise, if there's only 3 people that submit a draft between now and the 27th, excuse me, everybody's going to tackle those drafts. And it's just only going to be those 3 drafts. You're not going to have the variety of having 25 people in the class. And it's going to sort of shortchange the ones that didn't turn stuff in sooner. So if you can get it in before the 28th, it will probably be beneficial to you and your peer. Now, again, you do have up until the 28th. And what I will do is probably leave, initially it's going to close down between the 28th and 29th, because I got to see who actually turned stuff in and who didn't. And this should be a really easy 100, honestly. And I put sort of the breakdown, the grade of how that works within this. But I can't keep it open if somebody's not going to turn something in. So it will shut down at midnight on the 28th. After I do some grading, grade the ones that actually did what they needed to do, I will reopen it for the 29th, 30th, 31st, 1st, and the 2nd. It will shut down again on the 2nd because on the 3rd is when the final draft is due. And really, you should have had enough time to get whatever you needed to get if you use time wisely. But if you click here on my post, I kind of give you some indication of what you need to do, and then I give you this file. You download it. This is what you're going to need to use to answer based on your reading of your peer's essay. And it looks like this. So what I would suggest after you read your peer's essay, and I would probably read it at least once or twice, right? Because it may be difficult to answer all of these questions just by giving one reading. But you can type on here if you want. A sentence or 2, complete sentence or 2 per question should be enough. You can write more if you want. You don't have to. Again, you only have to pick one peer's essay. If you want to read other people's, that's fine. You don't have to do a peer review on every, 24 people in the class. You just need to do it on one other person's paper. But I would definitely answer as many of these questions as you can. Again, that's going to be really based on your peer. If your peer only submitted a 1-page essay, which is not basically incomplete, you may not be able to answer all 12. You may be only able to answer 6. Okay, that's fine. The ones you can't answer, I would explain to them the reason why you can't. You don't really want to leave anything blank here. You want to give them some sort of an answer. And yes or no works, but you don't want to just have yes or no as your answer. That's not a complete sentence. So you could say yes and then give me a sentence or 2, or no and give me a sentence or 2. Again, this is going to help your peer. So if your peer gave you basically yes or no answers, that's not going to tell you anything. Anybody can say yes or no, or maybe, right? That's not going to help you become a better writer or fix a particular part of your essay to improve your grade from a C to a B or a B to an A. So you want to be, particular here with your criticism and your critique. Give positive, constructive criticism. Don't go out there and say, well, yeah, your 3-page story just pretty much sucks. Well, again, that's like a yes or no. That's not helpful. It's hurtful in a lot of ways. And you're not telling anybody. If it sucks, okay, you can say that in general terms without being nasty about it. You can say, well, maybe improve this area, and that will sort of help enhance this particular part of the story. Again, we're all here to help each other, not bring people down. If I start seeing that, then we're going to have a serious talk, and we're going to have to address it in a certain way. I usually don't have that issue. I haven't had that issue in the past. So I'm hoping that it sort of stay that way. But again, like I said, be careful of your audience. Be careful of specific things that you write about. Nothing really offends me because I know you're not necessarily addressing me personally with it. But other people may not take it that way. We're heading on to an election year, so be careful about writing about politics if you don't think everybody's political affiliation in the class. Same thing with heavier subjects, abuse, drug abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, that type deal. Be careful what you say and what you do, because other people may take it and take it a different way, even though you didn't mean it. They don't know that because they're not there in front of you to sort of talk to you about it. So they just go by your their first impression of you is going to be your right. So just be careful of what you say and what you do. Again, it doesn't necessarily offend me as much, but it may your classmates. And then after you answer those questions to your best of your ability, you can either copy and paste those back to that particular peer that you read, or if you did it on that particular document, I would just go ahead and upload it as a Microsoft Word document so they can download it and read it, especially, if you want to use the grammar check and the spell check and that type of stuff. So I hope that sort of clarified some of the stuff for this particular week. And then as we get into week 2, which will be coming up relatively sooner than you think. So again, just let me know if there's anything I can do to assist you moving forward. And I hope everybody has a good rest of your week, good weekend. And I will be back with another video, hopefully not as lengthy or long. A lot of times these videos, because we are online and we don't meet the 2 times a week like most classes do, or 3 times, I'm sort of using what would be a 75 or a 90-minute class period into these videos to give you as much information as I can, so you can kind of work through the process on your own throughout the week and come back to the videos when you need to come back to them. Otherwise, again, I hope everybody has a great Tuesday, and I hope the rest of the week is, really good for you as well. Until we talk again and meet again, have a good week.